Today's episode of Variant is brought to you by Domain.com.
Today on Variant, I give you the history of Jessica Jones just in time for her new Netflix series. Welcome to Variant, where we love comics more than I'm excited to watch the new Jessica Jones series on Netflix. I'm your host, Arris. As we all know, the new Jessica Jones series will be released in its entirety November 20th on Netflix. So of course, as I always do when comic book characters get new TV shows or movies, I'm going to tell you all about that character. And in this instance, that would be Jessica Jones. So if you want to familiarize yourself with the character, this episode is for you. Hence, you're already clicking on this episode. But anyway, let's get into it. Jessica Jones was a character created by Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Gaydos to star in a Marvel series called Alias, after Bendis decided that his original idea of using Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman just wouldn't work for continuity and storytelling reasons. Thus, Jones was created and made her debut in Alias 1 in 2001, with a backstory that made her something of a retcon character, being shown appearing at the same high school as Peter Parker and having a crush on him. Now, before I get into her origin and comic evolution, just know the character has been around for about 14 years, which isn't very long for a comic book character, meaning there's not going to be a bunch of history for me to tell you guys, which for our purposes works out well anyway. With that out of the way, let's jump into her origin. Jessica Campbell was about to speak to her crush Peter Parker before being distracted by the spider bite that gave him his powers. While going home, she and her parents are in their family car when it collided with a military truck that was carrying radioactive chemicals. Her parents were killed and Jessica slipped into a coma. She was then adopted by the Jones family, hence her name, Jessica Jones. She would wake up from her coma during the time Galactus came to Earth to feast on the planet. Later, she would enroll back to Midtown High School, where she was at the receiving end of bullying by Flash Thompson. Peter Parker felt empathy towards Jessica as he also grew up without his parents, but Jessica lashed out at him because she thought he was just pitying her. It was at this time that the exposure from the radioactive chemicals gave her her powers. As the superhero Jewel, she had a brief career fighting crime. During one of her adventures, she ran into the mind-controlling Purple Man. He took control of her life and used her in many unpleasant ways. He even eventually tried to use her to kill Daredevil, but instead she attacked the first person she saw in a red costume, which just so happened to be the Scarlet Witch. After a fight with the Avengers, they helped to free her from mind control and even offered her a place on the roster. She declined, being quite disturbed by the abuse that the Purple Man had inflicted upon her. Saddened by the fact that almost no one noticed that she had gone missing for 8 months, Jessica gave up being a superhero and started the Alias private detective agency, working for superheroes and related clients, including Matt Murdock. During her time working for Alias, Jessica became pregnant by Luke Cage and briefly dated Scott Lang. She also briefly took on the darker identity Nitrous and left Alias. Later, she was offered a job working for the Daily Bugle on the superhero column, The Pulse. After investigating the appearance of the Young Avengers, she ended up arguing with J. Jonah Jameson over his opinions of costume heroes and quit before the birth of her child. She eventually married her baby's daddy, Luke Cage, so as you can imagine, the Netflix Luke Cage series, Daredevil series, and Jessica Jones series will all interweave quite nicely, since that's how it's done in the comic books anyway. During the Civil War storyline, after Jessica and Luke Cage are confronted by Iron Man and Ms. Marvel to register under the Superhuman Registration Act, they make their intentions clear to defy the new law. Making sure her daughter would be safe, Jessica travels to Canada with her, while Luke stays in New York and joins Captain America's Secret Avengers. Sometime after this, she would return to her costume identity of Jewel and join the New Avengers, where Luke Cage wanted her to use the name Power Woman since his superhero name is Power Man, and well, he's her husband. Then after the New Avengers, Jessica appears as an ally to the Mighty Avengers team formed by her husband, Luke Cage. But all this, my friends, brings us to powers and abilities. As a result of the chemical spill, Jessica Jones possesses superhuman strength and resistance to injury and the ability to fly at subsonic speeds. The exact limits of her strength and durability have not been defined, but she was able to lift a 2-ton police car with apparent ease. She was not able to fully withstand a venom blast from Jessica Drew, nor a severe beating by Iron Man and the Vision. Jessica was vulnerable to telepathic attacks, which led to her ordeal at the hands of the Purple Man, until mental barriers were put in place by Jean Grey to grant her better resistance. In addition to her superhuman powers, Jessica is a skilled detective and investigative journalist. And that, my comic comrades, is my summary of Jessica Jones. As I said, it was gonna be short and simple, but either way, now you know a little bit more about her before you watch her Netflix series. But before I wrap up this History of segment, it's time for reading recommendations. We have Alias Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can even check out Jessica Jones' The Pulse, the complete collection. When you buy a domain name from Domain.com, you get the power to influence and control what people find when they search for you online. No domain extension will help you tell your story like a .com or .net domain name. Domain.com is affordable, reliable, and easy to use. The guys at Domain.com gave Variant an awesome offer. Get 15% off Domain.com's already affordable domain names and web hosting when you use the coupon code Variant at checkout. So when you think domain names, think Domain.com. Did you know that Marvel had a rule in the mid-70s that Wolverine could not have arm hair while in costume, but he could have arm hair while he was in regular clothing? Why? I have no idea. Of course, this would eventually change because, well, it kind of made no sense. At all. So I guess we should be glad that now Wolverine is allowed to have arm hair while in costume. Oh, comic books. How you could be so ridiculous sometimes. First up for Wednesday, November 11th, we have Illuminati Issue 1. How do the villains of the Marvel Universe live in a world where the sky is constantly filled with heroes? I guess we'll find out in this series. Here we have Black Knight Issue 1. What do you do when it's your destiny to be damned? It's the question that the current Black Knight, Dane Whitman, must ask himself. Now we have Justice League Darkseid War one-shot. A boy becomes an army of gods. No longer does Billy Batson have access to the powers of the old gods. Now he commands the combined might of Highfather, Mantis, and the other new gods. And finally, we have Batman Issue 46. At last, Batman comes face to face with Gotham City's deadly new villain, Mr. Bloom. With the fate of the city hanging in the balance, Batman reaches out to the one man who might be able to help him, Bruce Wayne. And that'll bring another episode of Variant to a close. But remember, you can always like our Variant Facebook page to keep up with the show and all things comic related. You can also follow Variants on Twitter at Variant Comics or me on Twitter at Arris_Quinones. I'll see you guys next week when I talk about all things comics. Appearing at the same high school Peter Parker went to and having a crush on him. Cause it's Marvel.